Thanks, Jen. All right, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today. Before I get started, I just want to give you a little bit of background on CoreWorks. We're a leading software vendor focused on project information management. In particular, we deliver solutions for larger capital projects, many of which are greater than $1 billion in total installed value. Using our solutions, companies improve project execution by supplying their teams with the tools that they need to manage information, exchange data, and collaborate to ensure project success. We have customers all over the world, a real good mix between the EPCs and the owner-operators. And our industry is predominantly the oil and gas power with some mining projects. So building on our project information platform, we have provided a series of integrated solutions that provide business value to all your functional teams. Included are many best practice automated workflows that help you manage key business practices, including interface management. We remain focused on two core values: increasing compliance and reducing risk on capital projects. Okay, so let's talk about today's outline or today's agenda. I'm going to start off by giving you a little background. What initiated this webinar series was a recent interface management conference in Amsterdam. One of the reoccurring themes of the conference was the close link between interface and change management. The interface issues can often lead to change, and change can identify new interface issues. So we've taken that a step further, and we'll be exploring the relationships between interface and change, but also with risk and deliverables management. All projects practice these disciplines, but very few have implemented an integrated solution. On many projects, it's not uncommon for data to be scattered everywhere, and many systems don't share data. Integration will create the data relationships that will provide the teams with better information for decision making, progress tracking, and performance assessment. So today we're going to take a look at these relationships at a very high level. We'll review some of the possible approaches to an integrated solution, look at some of the challenges that the projects face, and the benefits that can be gained. As Jen mentioned, this is the first in a series of 3 webinars. So our second webinar, to be held at the end of this month, will focus more on the integration of change management. So we'll talk more specifics on how we would integrate interface with change management. And our webinar, to be held in the middle of March, will focus on interface with risk and deliverables. So I'm hoping to generate a lot of discussion, hopefully have a lot of questions. As Jen mentioned, we're going to hold off questions until the end of the session, but you're welcome to post your questions at any time into the WebEx tool there. So with that, I'll get started. So talk a little bit about interface management and some of the industry trends that we're seeing. We're definitely seeing an increase in organizations embracing interface management. The discipline is more mature and continues to gain adoption, especially in the oil and gas industry. Interface management is a tool that's used to provide early identification of potential risks to projects, and it's unique in that it promotes a collaboration and engagement between stakeholders that's not found in a formal contractual relationship. And the value of interface management is generally accepted and rarely challenged. Maybe now more than ever, projects are looking to improve project performance. And as projects continue to grow in size and complexity, they're multi-billion-dollar in cost and multi-year in duration, the value that interface management can provide is even greater. We have EPCs worldwide. There's more information to capture, and projects are working under compressed schedules as well. So these are the factors of projects that are continuing to drive the need for interface management, and certainly also lead to the potential negative outcomes, without a proper interface management solution in place. Projects understand the value. They know that by implementing a more structured approach to managing their interfaces and by facilitating communication and collaboration between their delivery teams, the end result is fewer issues. They really minimize the technical disconnects during engineering and certainly the reworking or re-evaluating of activities during the construction phase. So interface is really no longer the new guy in town. We're certainly seeing fewer situations where projects are looking to be educated, and more situations where they're really demanding more of their now mature practice. In addition, the champions or the early adopters of interface now have some solid research which was conducted by the Construction Industry Institute, which really backs that good interface management can improve project performance. The research study conducted a study of 46 projects, and they found that on average the cost growth of projects with some level of interface management was 4%, whereas the average cost growth on projects without an interface management practice in place averaged around 18%. So some really good information here. It's definitely worth the read, and I would encourage you all to go out. The website is provided here on the screen. I would encourage you to all go out and take a look at it to get some more information on that research project. And lastly, the projects are looking to expand their capabilities, and project practices are changing. Instead of focusing on each work process in isolation, organizations are now looking at how these interact with each other. And to increase the benefits of interface management, organizations want to expand its capabilities and value by integrating it with some of the other maybe more mature practices, such as change and risk and deliverables. So all projects can benefit from data integration and interoperability between these critical processes, and to be more effective, increase awareness, and to gain that competitive edge, integration is becoming a necessity. So let's take a look at some of the relationships between interface management and some other project management practices. We're not going to have time to cover all of these areas today, but we'll take a look at a few. If we start with contract management, a best practice for interface management is to identify your interfaces early, so during the front-end planning stages of a project. This provides improved scope definition, which can feed into your contract management practices. Project interfaces can become part of your bid package, ensuring greater accuracy in the bid process that can benefit both, not only the client but the contractor as well. And in addition, during contract closeout, if you include interfaces in your closeout procedures, this will provide further validation that the contract obligations have been fulfilled and there's nothing outstanding. If we take a look at scheduling, some projects are doing this. Some projects think they can use scheduling without interface management. But if we look at scheduling and an integration with interface management, projects should be looking at integrating high-risk interfaces to activities or to milestones in their schedule. Interface management will often track tasks and deliverables that are well below the level of activity that's typically tracked in a schedule. However, the interface tasks and deliverables can be rolled up to a schedule activity or milestone that can provide you that transparency and that early identification if you've got an interface-related risk to the schedule. So you can easily identify when a change to an interface deliverable has an effect on the schedule and vice versa. So this is the key goal with schedule integration, is to identify and address the important connection between interface date slippage and the associated schedule impact. So projects are going to find value in integrating across all of these processes, with interface management either feeding into the practice or receiving information from the other process. So imagine the power that you can place in the hands of your project team if, with a single query, they have the ability to view the entire history of a deliverable or of an interface or of a change request. So all of the data, all of the decisions that people have made, all of the people involved, the full audit trail becomes part of a particular deliverable, and all that information is related and available to your project team. So we touched briefly on a couple of these practices here. Our focus today is really going to be on the integration of interface with deliverables, risk, and change management. All right, so let's start with change. Change management is well understood, and pretty much all projects have implemented good practices when it comes to managing change. It basically refers to the process where changes to the scope of a project are identified, reviewed, and if approved, they're implemented. Project change can really arise from any event which results in a change to the original scope, execution time, or to the cost. A simplified change process is described here, with the change request initiated, its impact to the process, or its impact to the project is assessed, and the decision is communicated. And change can really be raised by anyone on the project. So internally within the project team, change can be initiated, or probably most common and most often is a change is initiated by the external sources. Change management is very important, and it's connected to all other project management processes. But we also believe that there should be a connection, or there is a connection between change and interface, and that one cannot be 100% effective without the other. An integration between these two will really bring alignment between the functional areas and bring a balance of business knowledge coming from the change side with technical knowledge, which you get from the interface side, to ultimately make better decisions. So we have a two-sided relationship between interface management and change management. If we look at change, change can often have a significant impact on the scope of work for one or more contractors. And if this is the case, the additional scope can lead to either new interfaces being identified that have to be managed, or possibly lead to additional interface issues that need to be resolved for existing interfaces. On the flip side, if we look at interface management, many of the issues discussed and resolved at the interface level are well below those that are defined at the contract level, and as a result, it's not unusual to uncover that not all the detail or all the expectations regarding an interface was defined and communicated early on. And as a result, it's very often the case that it can initiate numerous change orders or change requests throughout the life of the interface. So as a result, both parties need to be aware of the impact that it can have, and interface agreements and interface queries in your system should be closely monitored so that to ensure that they do not introduce significant, cost or schedule impact by way of change orders. And it's also very often that change will find its way into your interface register. So there's definitely, a very close relationship between the two project management practices. So the question really becomes, who's responsible for identifying when an interface could result in a change request, or when a change request may have an impact on an interface, or add to the number of interfaces to be managed. Should interface managers be looking for change? Should change managers be assessing all incoming change requests for the impact it has on interfaces? Certainly the easy answer is yes. Both parties should be aware of this and should be taking into consideration the impact one can have on the other. When an issue is identified, it's also good practice, or if you're attempting to implement and integrate these processes, it's also good practice to not only involve the interface and change managers, but also the scope manager or package leader. This is the individual that really has the detailed knowledge of the scope of work. So interface, by its very nature, will identify and result in the creation of change requests. So it's the integration between interface and change will probably be easier and less disruptive to your interface team. But you also need to make sure that the change team has bought in and that they are aware and will participate, and are really aware of the value that identifying project interfaces can have and the potential impact it can have on the project's bottom line. The second question is really how tightly do you want to integrate these processes? So again, both teams, you need to get buy-in from both teams. You need to make sure that both teams see the value in it. You need to make it easy and simple, right? You're not going to introduce some new complex procedures that they have to follow. And you also want to be very, very careful that one process does not bog down the other. Particularly with interface management, you don't want to make it too easy to initiate change requests. You don't want them to be, creating, numerous change requests on a daily basis for every interface that you're tracking in the system. So you want to be aware of that and take that into consideration when you're planning your implementation. So both of these, I believe that any project that strives to keep these two disciplines interfacing will find it well worth the effort. So that's just a little bit high level on interface and change. We're going to dive a bit deeper into this during our second webinar, which will be held at the end of this month. So let's take a look at risk management now. So the second practice, or the second good candidate for integration with interfaces is risk management and your risk register. Really, that's what we're talking about here, is ensuring that any high-risk interfaces are identified in your risk register. So like change, risk is a mature project management practice, and the importance of good risk management on any project is rarely challenged. And risk is basically the process of identifying the identification, assessment, and prioritization of project risks to mitigate the adverse effect that they may have on project performance. As I mentioned, identified risks are captured in your risk register, which is a very important tool for any project. And the risk register acts as a central repository for all identified risks. It includes each type of risk, the information and other information on each risk, such as the source, the description. It's assessed for its impact and probability to the and its probability. All right, so very important that we encourage and include high-risk interfaces in the risk register. So talk a bit about why this is important. Interface management is really a risk mitigation tool. Interfaces can represent significant risk to a project, with the greatest risk is typically represented by external interfaces. Those are interfaces that are managed between your major scope packages or between the major EPCs on your project. And poorly managed interfaces have actually been identified in the top 10 risks to a project, right up there with labor risks and material or equipment risks. Also on a mega project, there are thousands of interfaces to be managed, and all of them represent risk. However, some more than others. All right, we're not suggesting here that you take all of your interfaces or all of your interface queries and issues that you're tracking and put them in your risk register. But what you want to do is identify those high-risk interfaces. Maybe those that involve long lead items, or they fall on the critical path, or possibly they have a lot of interdependencies amongst each other. These are the interfaces that would be candidates for inclusion in your risk register. So to be effective, you also need to plan for the identification and evaluation of all risks to a project. So, we're certainly discussing here the inclusion of interface risks that may not necessarily be already addressed and included in the risk register. So each risk that's identified is logged in your risk register, and it serves as a central repository. It prioritizes each risk and includes actions on how to mitigate or prevent the risks. So again, as those interfaces that represent highest risk to the project should fall under your risk umbrella and should be logged into the risk register. So you can benefit certainly by providing your risk management team and the people that are monitoring that with providing them with the complete full picture. And really our goal here is, as with any risk management process, is about preventing showstoppers. You want to prevent an event which causes a delay to the project schedule or significantly increases costs. And interface conflicts can be a major source of showstoppers. You've got a procurement of a long lead item is overlooked, concrete is poured and embedments are forgotten, or a pump is relocated and the fabricator is not informed. So there's a lot of interface issues that can result in a showstopper. So again, it's not a feasible or even advisable to include all your interface issues in your risk register. You do want to be able to look at and identify those which represent significant risk, and ensure that those are included and identified in your risk register. Okay, and the last project management practice that we want to talk about today is deliverables management. Basically, deliverables management is the ability to track and manage documents for a project. It's the process of ensuring those deliverables are received, distributed to the right individuals for review and approval, and allows for the ability to track progress against each of those deliverables. And really, with deliverables management, reporting is a key component. You have reports such as the deliverables comparison report, or the deliverables discrepancy report, which will track the discrepancies between your planned and your actual dates for receiving deliverables. And these all help your project managers to identify trends and conditions that need resolution. So why is it important to have a link between interface management and deliverables? Well, really it comes down to the volume of information that we're tracking. So in a mega project, we're talking about thousands of documents that are created and that are constantly changing. And many of these documents are interface related and are the subject of interface agreements. So it's important that interfacing parties have access to the most recent revision and are also automatically informed when new revisions are received by the project. So an integrated approach will create a relationship between selected documents and the interface or interface agreement to which they're associated. And this relationship provides a link that can ensure that ongoing updates and additional revisions are communicated and notifications are sent out to all stakeholders, including interfacing parties. It also provides, so not only do you get that sort of automated benefit of that integration between your interface and your deliverable, but it also kind of provides a connection or a link between the two project teams as well. So, document control is a little more aware of what's going on in interface, and interface has maybe a tighter connection to document control, which maybe will result in a proactive environment of information sharing and teamwork. So many projects use a distribution matrix or a communication matrix to handle distribution of interface documents. However, it's very manual, and inevitably, somebody is missed. Somebody that should be on that distribution list is not on there, and it can very easily get outdated over the course of a project. Another method is to piggyback on the transmittal process. So identifying interface documents as they are transmitted and processed by document control. So that's the method and the approach that CoreWorks is looking at, and it's something that we will discuss in our third webinar to be held in March. All right, so why is this all important? And we've kind of touched on this, throughout the slide deck today. Covering the various reasons why integration is important, and it always comes back to the cost, schedule, and scope. But there are thousands, if not millions, of interrelated tasks that need to be executed throughout a large capital project and throughout the project life cycle. And really a key component to that success is ensuring that all your project teams and including both your internal teams and your external teams, are working with all the information that they need, all the information to make proper decisions and take proper actions when they're executing tasks or making, various decisions. So integration, specifically with these 4 disciplines, really brings it all together. And that tight alignment will provide each of these project teams with better visibility on scope, potential issues, and ensure that there's more proactive project management happening. Ultimately, what we're looking for is better performance and early warnings of any potential issues, either with regards to deliverables, change, interface, and then risk kind of ties it all together. So the importance of integration is pretty obvious. So why are not all projects doing this? Well, there's lots of challenges, but it really all comes back to people, processes, and tools. If we start with people, one of the challenges could be, top management buy-in. You need to make sure that everybody's committed, everybody is part of the decision, they understand, where your project's going, and it's also about early planning, right? So you need to start planning for this type of integration very early in the project stages. Lack of resources can be a problem, right? If you don't have the proper people in place or experienced people to do this type of integration, that can also be, a challenge to or a detriment or to implementing this type of integration. Lack of commitment, it sounds like a good idea, but my team's really busy. I really can't take on additional interface, issues, right? So there's that lack of commitment, lack of buy-in. Maybe they're not seeing the value that this can provide. And then the processes. So there's not really a lot of, in my experience, what I've seen on the projects that I've worked on, there's not really a lot of people doing this, and there's not sort of a clear path on how this integration would work. And there's complexity there, right? There's always complexity, right? The devil's in the details. When, what may sound like a simple integration is never simple, right? So there's a lot of complexity involved in successfully accomplishing this type of integration without putting a lot of additional burdens on the various teams, right? You don't want to slow them down. They have a job to do, and they need to do it. And then there's tools, right? There's not, depending on the tools that the project has chosen to manage or to execute these processes with, the tools may not have the capability to do the integration. Or you've got a number of different solutions that your project's using, and those different solutions don't talk well with each other. So that's just probably some. I'm sure the people on the call can probably give me more challenges in this type of integration, and I would love to hear it. So if anybody has some additional challenges that they'd like to add to this list, that would be great, or certainly some additional benefits. We want to hear it. But basically, it's people, process, tools, and the complexity in doing this type of integration. So in summary, I just want to go over a couple of things here. Is that integration is good. It's going to give you more information. Your team will have at the click of a button that trail, kind of that audit trail, and that relationship and that link between the various project information and artifacts that you're collecting on your project. So it's very important to track and manage those relationships. And also, it's going to be an ongoing process improvement, right? You're going to learn as you go. We're going to learn with you as you go. So it's going to be, plan for continuous improvement. Make sure you're working with a vendor that is supportive of continuous improvement. And as I mentioned earlier, plan for integration. So you want to plan early, right? As with any practice, anything that you're going to implement on your project, you want to start planning for it as early as possible. And then, of course, we've got better data plus better management, which is ultimately going to result in better decisions. So that's all I had to share for today. I'd like to open it up for questions, and so if you have any questions or anything, even if you'd like to share, a story, something that you've done on your project, we would love to hear it. So I'll open up the floor for questions.
Okay, Kelly, this is a good topic. We already have a couple of questions coming in. The first one we have is how do you get around the integration of many mainstream software tools? Example, Primavera, SAP, Teamcenter.
Okay, that's a very good question. This is one of the challenges that I had mentioned is if you're working with different types of software applications, how do you integrate those and make those connections so that you can have create those relationships between the data. If it takes scheduling, for example, one of the ways that we've tackled that here at CoreWorks is to import. We have the ability to import a project schedule or a work area schedule. So we have that ability to do that import. So there is some work that needs to be done or some communication that needs to be done between the planner and the interface manager. But once that initial sort of upfront legwork is done, we can take continuous exports from a schedule, import it into CoreWorks, and create a comparison between the interface data that we're tracking and the schedule information to provide those discrepancy reports that I talked about, which will highlight potential issues. So there's always the good old Excel import-export, right? That's often done across different software applications. There's also a lot of applications nowadays offer public APIs. So if that's the case, if the tool that you're using has an API, custom applications could be built that will integrate the two applications in order to create those relationships as well.
Okay, great. That was a good question. The next question we have is, Kelly, have you ever worked on a project that integrated interface management with change management? Wait.
Go ahead. Okay, thanks for the question. I actually have. I've worked on a couple of projects that are looking at the integration between interface management and change management. And on those projects, we took I guess you could say, a cautious approach. And I also, have been working with a trusted advisor, and he suggested this to me as well, that you want to, take that almost like baby steps, right? You can always build on your integration, but initially this particular project looked at the ability from a interface query, or we call it in our system an interface agreement, to be able to flag it as a potential change request or a potential change notice, I believe they called it. So that flags that interface query as potentially, should be up for consideration for change or may result in a change request. And that allowed that project team to certainly query on those interface issues that were flagged as a potential change notice, and then address those proactively before formally putting it into the management of change process for the project. So they were dealing with it sort of up front before they were bogging down that other process or putting a lot of burden on that other process of having to go through that formal management of change process. So it was a very sort of unique way of doing it and of integrating interface with change management. And it's definitely the way that I would recommend projects sort of initially get started and with that type of implementation. So yes, I guess the short answer is yes. We here at CoreWorks have done that on numerous projects.
Awesome, thanks, Kelly. The next one we have is, based on your experience, which of these three disciplines has the highest priority?
Okay, so which, if you were looking at an integration of all three, which would you prioritize as the first one? I'll take that as the question. Okay, so certainly I believe all three are important. If I had to rank them, I'd probably pick change. I'd put change as the highest priority. So if you already have interface management on your project, whether it's a formal or informal process, you already are somewhat managing risk. All right, you already understood that interfaces represent risk to your project, and you're addressing that risk with your interface management program. if I look at deliverables, there are other ways around it, right? So you can do a tight integration with deliverables, or there's other workarounds, right? So I've seen projects be quite successful with the other workarounds. But as far as change goes, change really occurs on a daily basis on a project, right? There's always ongoing change. I think especially even more so in the construction side of things. So if you're doing interface management into the construction, there's change happening daily in construction, so it becomes even more important to have that integration there. So change is occurring often. It definitely will have a direct impact on your contractor's scope of work, which is what we're trying to manage here with interface management and get control over. And it's also widespread. It can have a widespread, significant impact on your project. So I would pick change. I would prioritize change.
Great answer. One more here, actually two more. Do you know if PMI has embraced interface management as a core principle in project management?
That's a great question, and I actually had made a note to myself here. As far as I know, they haven't formally addressed interface management, but I do know that they have a new knowledge area that they refer to as the project stakeholder management. If you read up on project stakeholder management, it sounds very familiar and very similar to what projects are trying to address with interface management. So while they haven't officially addressed it as interface management, they're not calling it interface management, there's definitely a lot of overlap and a lot of similarities between their knowledge area of project stakeholder management.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. I have another one here. Does the integration that you're talking about, does it need to be implemented within the same platform?
So the question was, does the integration need to be implemented within the same platform? Well, ideally, yes, and ideally on the CoreWorks platform. But if you are, I think this is kind of similar to a question we had earlier. If you are executing these practices using the same software platform, integration is definitely easier, right? It's just easier as a vendor to provide that integration across the various solutions and tools that are provided. Your team's also going to benefit, right? They're going to have a common platform and a common experience. So, hopefully, if the vendor's done it right, what looks right, it looks a certain way and works a certain way for change management, looks and feels the same way as it does in interface management, right? So there's definitely a lot of benefits from integrating this on a common platform. However, it's not always possible, right? And even though we can hope for it here at CoreWorks, it's not always the case where everybody is on a common platform. So if you are using different software tools and want to do an integration, a lot of vendors will provide a public API, right? So I mentioned this earlier, they'll have a public API that can be used to provide that integration. Of course, it depends on the vendor that you're working with and the platform that you've got. Without a public API, probably your next best approach is if you can support these sort of import-export of things to maybe even an automated import-export of data to create that relationship. It's a bit more manual, but it would be the next best option.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly. Sorry, there's a bit of a pause between the questions just so that I can make sure there's no echoing over the line. Got another interesting question here. I work in the product development area, but are there any key differences with interfaces one might encounter with projects from different areas, IT, engineering, etc., that may be helpful to understanding this topic?
Okay, so go ahead. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the question, Jen. It's, are there any differences between different types of interfaces that may be helpful to understanding this topic? I don't believe so, not that I can think of offhand. I'm not sure if I have a great answer for this question. Whether it's, you know, an engineering interface or a construction interface that you're trying to manage, I think the same issues and challenges come up, and the same integration is necessary. So I don't really see a difference between, you know, managing interfaces for engineering over, you know, internal interfaces even, you know, within different scope areas or across your disciplines within the project team itself. They're all going to face the same challenges and benefit from the same integration.
Okay, we have lots of good discussion on the line today. So I'm going to read this one. If the portal is exposed to multi-contractors, it is fair many different solutions exist and disallow integration. What is difficulty developing API cost? Understand that question?
Okay, so well, I think I'll give it a shot. I'll give it a shot. And this is great. You know, this is the type of discussion and that we always encourage and we hope to see. And definitely shows that there's an interest in integration across these practices. So if I look at the question again, so the portal is typically exposed to multiple contractors, right? So, you know, especially with interface management, you know, speaking to what I know through the CoreWorks, contractors from around the globe will access the portal and be able to participate in interface management, you know, at the level that the project allows them, right? So certainly there's permissions and security that come into play that can control that. So if you are working on that common platform, and, you know, again, speaking to my experience with the CoreWorks applications, we can allow that multi-contractor access to a single portal and control security and access rights and visibility. So while the contractor may have the ability to raise an interface query or to flag possibly an interface, maybe they've been assigned a new interface and they want to flag it as a potential change order. Maybe they feel strongly that, you know, this is going to result in a change to my scope and I want to raise a change request. That can be managed through that portal. And as far as difficulty in developing an API, we here at CoreWorks have a public API, so we have that ability to, you know, share information with other applications. I can't really speak to the difficulty level. We do it. I've done it. It's not difficult. It's building the integration between the two would take a you know, in our organization here, it would require that you engage our professional services team to take advantage of the public API that we have to offer. That's really all I can say on that point there, Jen.
Okay, some awesome questions. If Kelly's not addressing them exactly how you're intending, please just raise your hand and I'll open the mic and then you guys can have an open chat between each other. The next one I see is I've seen problems arising where controlled documents have been transmitted through the interface management system rather than doc control. We try to use the interface management system for uncontrolled documents, but we do reference transmittal numbers from doc control. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and it comes up all the time. And I believe, if I remember correctly, we even discussed this at the Interface Management Conference in Amsterdam. So not only did we discuss interface and change, but interface and deliverables was also a hot topic. So I've seen it done both ways as well. I've seen where through their interface system and their interface process, they have the ability to even attach control documents, right? So I'm a contractor, I'm looking for, you know, a drawing or a document from another contractor. That contractor, you know, through the project's practices and policies have agreed that they could actually, you know, attach that controlled, what would normally be a controlled document, right to the agreement and submit it right back at the contractor. it's not always a preferred method. I mean, that is one of the workarounds that I have discussed, and I have worked with projects that have done that. There's a downside to that. There's a pro and a con, right? The pro is contractors are getting the information they need quickly. The con is now you've got a rogue document out there, right? So now you've got a contractor with what should be a control document, and how does he know when a new revision is submitted, or how does he know if he's working with the current revision? So there's a lot of downside to that approach. Other people that I have talked to as well have also done the same type of thing that you mentioned there, is where they will just reference the transmittal number in the response. So yes, your document is ready. It was submitted to the project. I submitted it on this transmittal number. The pro with that is now you don't have that kind of rogue document flying around. The con is now the other contractor has to somehow go get that document, right? So there's a little bit of a lag or delay in that information actually being shared, because now he's got to jump through the hoops to go to the project and get the document. So that's also another method that's been done. What we've been able to do here at CoreWorks is we have been able to, as I mentioned, integrate it with our transmittal process, right? So that we kind of avoid both of those scenarios and the cons that both can present, and do it a bit more automated. Of course, there's work and possibly downsides to that as well, but it's something that when we're working with a client or a customer and implementing interface management, it is something that always comes up. Do we do the attach the document? Do we do the referencing the transmittal, or should we look at your integrated approach? Great question. I would encourage the person who posted that, if you want to put that out, if you are on the LinkedIn group for interface management, I think that will be a great topic of discussion where we could get other people sharing their experiences and their thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kelly, because even in this discussion forum, we have people chiming in to what they've been doing as well.
Okay. Did you want to read any of the comments?
Scott responded saying that they actually use the interface form to reference the document number, but it's access to the document control system so that revisions are managed.
Yeah. That's probably the most common approach, right? Reference the doc number, reference the transmittal. They still have to go through their document control in order to get it. Revision management is very important, right? We don't want to introduce additional errors because somebody was working off the wrong revision of a document.
Right. Another question asking, is CoreWorks actively enlightening, educating companies about interface management?
Absolutely. We've been very fortunate in that, we have the ability very early on, going back a number of years ago, to work with a major EPC on understanding what interface management is and how they implement it. I think they were very much a leader at the time of interface management. We learned a great deal from them. As some of you may know, it was not too long after that a major owner-operator came knocking on our door, and we were able to take our product that much further in getting the owner's perspective. So now we've had the benefit of working with a major EPC to understand what their challenges are in interface management, as well as the owner-operator. We also work closely here with the University of Waterloo on some research projects. We've had people on the Construction Industry Institute working on the research project that I mentioned. So there were some, people directly from CoreWorks on that research project. So we've been very fortunate in that way. And yes, we do have organizations and projects looking to us to help educate them on, what are best practices? How do we go about implementing it? How do you ensure adoption, right? How do you get your contractors to use the system, right? That's very important. If you can't get buy-in from those contractors, if they're not using it, it's going to fail, right? So there's a lot of, value and benefit that we can bring to the table just through our experience.
Great. Awesome. Well, I think that is the end of the questions so far. If you have any more, I'll leave the chat open for about another 10 minutes and you can enter them in and I'll get them answered and in the follow-up email. But thanks, Kelly, so much for spending this time with us today. and getting us started on the complete integration conversation. It's definitely a topic that people are interested in, and this is a great lead in to your next two webinars in your series that take you more into the nuts and bolts on how this looks when it's actually implemented. If you haven't signed up for those webinars yet, please visit our site and do so, and we hope to see you on those webinars as well. This has been a great conversation today. Thanks to everyone for joining us and for asking questions, and yeah, we hope to see you next time. Bye.